Hello, let's fix the camera for a few minutes. Right, it's June 26, 2022, and it is around 11 p.m. here in the Philippines. The Philippines is in Southeast Asia, and particularly, I am at southern Luzon here in the Philippines, being that the Philippines is composed of three major islands, the Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao Islands. All right, tonight is Usapang Aswang, Usapang Aswang. So, um, let's not be too loud about this. The topic is the Aswang Factor, or the subject, or the title of this live stream. Incidentally, my latest video is on my female cousin, who recently died uh, during childbirth. And she perished along with the child. So, somewhat in a way related to the topic tonight, because the aswang is also reputed to cause miscarriages and deaths on women who are about to give birth. By the way, I'm Jason, your host. I am a businessman, an educator, teacher. I am a writer. I focus on poetry and cultural research. I'm also a musician, a rock guitarist, and a martial arts enthusiast. Okay, outdoors hobbyist, and prepper, survivalist. Blade aficionado, blade designer. And this channel, this small YouTube channel, Hagbayon, is devoted to literature, current events, rock music, blade culture, the outdoors, martial arts, prepping, and survivalism, and whatnot. All right, let's go back to our topic, the Aswang Factor, the Aswang culture of the Philippines. Now, the question now is, what is an Aswang? What is an Aswang? Um, the Aswang as a term is, well, the Aswang as a term in Philippine psyche and Philippine culture is a catch-all term. No, it's a catch-all term for shape-shifting creatures that consume human flesh, human blood, and fetus. So it's a catch-all term, an umbrella term for shape-shifting creatures that consume human flesh, human blood, and fetus, according to Philippine culture, Philippine folklore. It's actually according to our, researchers at Wikipedia. And what are the types of aswang? What are the types of aswang? As per Bicol culture, where I am, where I'm Bicol, we have two major types: the aswang lakaw, or aswang na layog. Meaning, the aswang lakaw is the aswang that walks, while the aswang layog is the aswang that is actually, you know, flying. So it's the aswang that flies. So those are the two basic types. But there are other, types of aswangs according to anthropologists, researchers, and cultural, writers. We have the first one, the mandurugo, or the vampire. So somewhat a parallelism to European culture, European narrative on the vampire. Here in Southeast Asia, here in the Philippines, we also have vampires in the form of the mandurugo, or the aswang that actually sucks blood. So it's a blood sucking aswang actually. So that's a mandurugo. And also there's also the manananggal. Okay, it's a type of aswang that segments itself. Okay, when it turns into an aswang, it's usually a young woman, or a, a beautiful lady, and it would go to a corner in the dark, and it would segment itself from waist down, and the upper body would then fly. It would grow wings, that are reminiscent of bat wings, and it would then fly away and go around and look for victims. So technically, it's actually a swang that is layog, or a swang that flies, while the mandurugo, well, it accounts do not really say whether they are aswang layog or aswang lakaw. But definitely the manananggal is an aswang layog, or an aswang that flies. And third type is the were dog, or taong aso, o taong ayam. So it's an aswang that transforms into a dog, and would go around and find victims. Okay, another type is the witch. The witch. Sometimes here in Bicol, uh, the term aswang is interchanged with the term uh, witch, bruja, or witch. So you are an aswang, or you are a bruja. So usually, the witch is actually a curse maker. So it's the enemy of the healer, okay, or the shaman. It's actually a curse maker, the witch. And then the fifth type, is the ghoul, okay, Ghouls, or ghouls, the corpse eater. So they eat dead, you know, dead humans. They consume, or they partake of human flesh, dead human flesh. So those are the types of aswang. Although in the main we have the aswang lakaw and the aswang layog. And you know what? As per Philippine culture, or also Bicol culture, oral narrative, you are supposed to be, discreet when talking about the aswang, because it is said that the aswang can hear, you know, when you are talking about their kind. All right. The question now is, what are the common traits? Okay, what are the common traits of an aswang? If you want to identify one, what are the common traits of an aswang? Because as we know, aswangs are shapeshifters, and they can appear human, or they can appear as an ordinary animal like a dog or a cat or a pig. Well, aswangs are nocturnal. primarily. So they like the dark. They like it when it's nighttime. So although they also walk around during the day, and one telltale sign is that when you look at their eyes, it is said that your reflection would be inverted. So, Aswang is kind of different because it looks at the world in a different light. It's inverted, somehow making the Aswang different from all of us, subversive from all of us. Okay, and then also the Aswang is said to be a forest or wilderness dweller. As a rule, okay, as a rule, Aswangs are forest or wilderness dwellers. They live at the outskirts of civilization or human activity. They live far away from other people. Although it's just, you know, as a rule, because sometimes they also can, live within a village, stay with the ordinary people and would then launch attacks and would then victimize other people without warning. Okay, another trait is that they are supposed to be unclean and foul smelling. Okay, unclean and foul smelling, very much repugnant to Philippine, Philippine hygiene. Because Filipinos like to be clean, Filipinos like to smell good. But then the aswang is different. The aswang is foul smelling and unclean because perhaps primarily due to the fact that the aswang partakes of dead flesh or dead people. And also the aswang is said to be lewd. Female aswang is said to be, you know, obscene and would show its naked body and would, in the short, highly sexual. As a matter of fact, somewhat seductive, even. That's why they can easily victimize men. What else? Actually, yeah, as I mentioned before, one trait is that if you look at their eyes, their your reflection would then be inverted. That's as per oral tradition and narratives here in the Philippines. Okay. The question is, how do we repel? How do we combat or how do we repel an aswang? Well, depending upon your faith, okay, beliefs, it is believed that holy objects can actually repel aswangs. So it depends upon your religion, if if ever. It is also regarded that it's also salt is also highly regarded as effective in warding off an aswang. Salt, ash, okay. Talking about salt, um, when my partner, my wife was pregnant, you know, because she had miscarriages before, I had to be careful, and follow all the protocols, health protocols, and also the cultural protocols. So when she got pregnant again, I made sure that I followed all the rules, so to speak, and I would actually spread salt at the roof of our house to ward off the aswang. I would do that every night, following the advice of the elders. So salt is highly regarded as somewhat effective in warding off the aswang. Also ash, and of course buntot pagi or stingray tail. That's why I really wanna own buntot pagi because it's supposed to be a pangontra or deterrent to the aswang as per Philippine culture. Buntot pagi. Aside from it's really effective as a latigo or whip. So buntot pagi. Also vinegar, although it's the first time I heard about this. Maybe if you will cook the aswang, I don't know. The vinegar is also effective in warding off the aswang. Also, there's betel nut chew. Betel nut, in the provinces, particularly I am in blade culture. So particularly pandays or blacksmiths here in the Philippines, they really like to chew betel nut. So it turns out that aside from it becoming a nice pastime for them, it also wards off the aswang according to tradition, according to narratives. Of course, something else we have more urine. So urine can actually. So maybe if you you know answer to the call of nature in the wilderness or in the dark, the aswang won't you know show up. But then in recent depictions in movies, mm, apparently urine is not a very effective deterrent because in such movies we would see victims who are drunk and victims who are walking at night uh, near forested areas, and they would answer the call of nature, and all of a sudden the aswang is there, and they get victimized and they die. So but then again, urine is listed as an effective an effective item to ward off aswang. What else? The reverse activity. uh, this is actually not an object but an activity. Reversal of the ladder. The ladder, you reverse it. So there's a belief that if you reverse the ladder, the aswang cannot get into your house. You see, in Bahay Kubo, Nipa Hut houses, they use bamboo ladders. Bamboo ladders getting in and out of the house. Getting up the house and going down. So if you reverse it, it's believed that it will what? It will ward off, or it will prevent the aswang from getting what? From getting inside your oh, the guitar is here. Getting inside the house. Also, to prevent miscarriages, as I mentioned earlier, I mentioned that the aswang can actually. Oh, hi, hi, Pinay survivalist. Good evening. I am, catching up on going live. I hope we can have a live streams soon. I am now in a place where there is Wi-Fi, so I hope we can go live along with Tokayo. Just got here and I just wish I'll check it. I'll check if my StreamYard will work again because previously my StreamYard wasn't working so well and it would just annoy all of us. All right. Yeah, there to prevent miscarriages. It is believed that this is quite funny. The husband must remain under the house naked, furiously waving a sword. So that's how you. Well, I somehow did this, but not naked. So I uh, I would usually go out of the house when my wife was pregnant and would spread salt all over the place, even at the roof of the house. And when I would be carrying a ball or a minasbad, okay, a bolo or a minasbad, but not naked. So You see, some houses in the provinces, they are elevated, you know, wooden houses, nipa hut houses, and there's space underneath. Usually, it's for farm products, you know, farm products and farm tools, etc., etc. So houses are elevated, and we have bamboo, bamboo ladders. And think about it, the swan could get down there, and with its protruding tongue, it could, pierce the the belly of the mother to be, or of the pregnant woman, and actually cause a miscarriage or something like that. So, but then there's also the belief that if the husband goes under the house naked, furiously waving a sword, it would ward off the aswang as well. So quite funny, but it's part of Philippine, beliefs in the Philippine culture. What else? According to tradition, sharp sticks or bolos, okay, should be inserted. I mean, should be inserted between the bamboos of the house, for houses that are made of bamboos, of the house floor, to prevent the aswang from lurking under the house. So yeah, as we said, some houses here in the provinces, they're elevated and they're made of nipa and wood and bamboo, and usually they use bamboo as roof. I know, as flooring, bamboo. They could have gaps, and within those through those gaps, the swan could actually get in when it transforms into some other type of disguised animal, and it would actually, you know, insert its tongue, etc. So it is said that sharp sticks or bolos, if inserted in between the bamboos, it could ward off the aswang as well. And that sick people should not stay in houses with holes, and should be quiet, should not groan in pain or in difficulty. Um, I think the rationale is, if you are sick and all that, and you stay in a house with holes, the aswang could actually get in. You know what? I have an experience on this. In the year 2000, at our ancestral home, the father of my auntie's husband, or the father-in-law of my aunt, was staying with them, and I was then studying in Manila, and I went home uh, for a vacation, and I was actually occupying one of the rooms there. And you know what? In the middle of the night, there was a really big dog inside the house. I don't know how it got in there, and the father-in-law of my aunt was actually sick at that time, quite sick, and it was very difficult to believe that a stray dog would just get inside your house. It's not. Dogs are very, very territorial. They respect territories, and you know they guard territories. And if there's a reason for that dog to get up there, and you know what, it was the upper floor of the house, and the dog was there, hiding in one corner. Very weird for a dog. Very weird behavior for a dog. So that's my experience on the matter. And if you look at the dog, at that time, it appeared to me that the dog had human eyes. It looked at us with human eyes, as if it were human. So, but then again, that was just my experience. According to Raisi Bayan, if it's your experience, then it must be true, as per your experience. But it would all depend upon how you experience things. But that was my opinion on the matter. It could be that it was only in my mind, but then again, at that time, it seemed like it was impossible. It was very unlikely for a dog to get up there. So sick people should not stay in houses with holes, okay, and not groan too much. Okay, that's one way of warding off aswangs. Another question: have you ever heard of the so-called special anti-aswang oil? I hope you maybe you can order it from Shopee or Lazada. I don't know, but there's a special anti-aswang oil. Yeah, it exists. How do you make it? Okay, first you select a particular coconut. You go to a coconut tree and you select a particular coconut and watch it grow. It takes around 45 days for a coconut to grow. And pick it at midnight or something like that during full moon when weather is wet, or when it is a gloomy night, or when it's a chilly night or a cold night. And then you grate and squeeze the coconut juice, and you boil the coconut juice until it becomes oil, and you recite a secret prayer. I don't know what prayer is that. Maybe you invent a prayer, secret anyway, and then you throw all the waste into the ocean or into the sea, so aswang can't trace the oil maker. And you hang the oil at the door of the house, and it will boil when aswang is near. It will boil, so it will somehow mark the presence of an aswang. So that's how you make an anti-aswang oil. maybe maybe you should try to make one, uh, just for bushcraft or something. You're staying in the forest, for example, so Philippine forest, so why not follow what the elders are saying? Last, I think it was only 2 weeks ago, I went camping, wilderness camping, and I was alone. So I only had my bolo though, so I was not really alone. I should have known about this, and I should have made, because we had lots of coconuts there. So okay, question: what are the other ways to detect an aswang aside from the oil? Okay, if you don't have the oil, maybe you should listen to scratching noises. You know, scratching noises from the ceiling of the house. It's believed that the aswang would, create scratching noises. I remember my cousin. My cousin. I just harvested coconuts in one of our properties, and my cousin was helping me. And I think it was in March, or it was during our previous harvest. I think it was. That was March. He was telling me about our ancestral home there, and that there were so many kababalagan, or weird stuff happening there. And he mentioned scratching on the wall, on the walls of the house, on the upper walls at that, huh? Upper walls and the roof or the ceiling of the house. When in fact, no ordinary human can actually access it. Or knocking. So he was actually attributing the noises to elementals and all that. But now knowing about the aswang, eh, knowing that it's one way to detect an aswang, then it could very well have been, a kind of, aswang right there. And the good thing about it is I'm going to go camping there in a few days. So how I wish I had Wi-Fi there, so I could go live and show you guys how weird the place is. Oh, okay. Another way to detect an aswang is, as I mentioned earlier, if you look at the eyes of the aswang, your reflection would be inverted. You have, yeah, it would be inverted. And I even commented earlier that it somehow shows that the aswang is really an alteration, is really an aberration, in Philippine psyche, Philippine culture, in as much as even its view of the world is inverted. So the aswang is really kind of, different, against the flow, or should we say, subversive. So that's aswang. Also, dogs, cats, and pigs with no tails. Okay, they're also uh, considered as disguises for the aswang. Dogs, cats, pigs with no tails. I'm not really sure about this, but sometimes they say that if you look at the dog or the cat or the pig, they would have human eyes. Human eyes. They look at you like they're human. So that's one way to figure if you're actually, dealing with an aswang or an ordinary pig or wild boar, particularly because the wild boar has fang, like this one, fang. So there. Now the question now is, how do you kill an aswang? So we talked about warding off the aswang, etc. But how do we kill it? How do we kill an aswang? There's actually you know a process or a way to do it. Okay, uh, elders say that you strike the middle of the witch's back or the aswang's back. Okay, because if you don't, if you hit it in other areas, it will simply lick the wound and heal it. It will lick and heal the wound. So you you strike it. You strike the middle of the aswang's back, so it cannot lick the wound. And then later on, after you do that, wait, after you strike the middle of the witch's back or the aswang's back, you cut it into pieces when it's immobilized and all that. You cut it into pieces, and each piece must be separated and taken to different river banks. If you cut it into two, into you into two, you separate the two body parts and you place them in the opposite river bank or in opposing river banks. So perhaps so that they could not, that's one cannot, like transformer or something. They cannot, you know, form again. Also, after that, you bury the bolo under the ground. After that, you bury the bolo underground. So you hit the aswang at the back, middle of the back, and then when it is in a when it gets immobilized, you cut it to pieces, and you throw away the pieces in different parts of the, especially if there's an ocean or a sea, you are near the sea, you you throw the various body parts in various seashores and riverbanks. That's it. And then you bury the bolo uh, under the ground, and maybe so that the aswang cannot smell it, or so that they can avenge their kind. And then one thing to note is that, sorry to say to our friend Jose Rizal Adventures, but your weapons, your guns are useless. You know, firearms are useless against the aswang. So sad to say. So for those preppers out there who like to use the gun, particularly Jose Rizal Adventures, I'm really sorry, but your guns won't work against the aswang. Sorry, sorry, bro. Uh, so, so if you come to Bicol when you go home in the Philippines, make sure that you have you acquire a bolo, because I heard that there are aswangs in Texas already. They acquired green card and visa. In disguise, they got to the US. I read about it. There's this writer who likes to write horror, stories, and I remember reading a short story of hers, wherein the story depicted or depicts a Filipina housemaid, OFW, going to UK, particularly going to UK, and she had with her all her uh, charms and all her mangkukulam, mangkukulam or sorcery items. And same with Aswangs. For all you know, they're already there and all that, and working at the White House. Okay. Another thing is the Aswang historical? Or can we read about the Aswang in history? Well, actually, it is historical in the sense that there are already records about the Aswang as early as 16th century, particularly in Bicol history. In Bicol history, writings by Lisboa, oh no, by Frey of Lisboa, wherein Frey de Lisboa was talking about the uh, Bicolano gods and deities, and he mentioned Gugurang as a supreme god. Okay, Gugurang as somewhat like Zeus or like God, and then with Aswang as the counterpart of Gugurang. So Gugurang as the good god and Aswang as a bad god. So apparently, uh, hi there. Kung magiging Dindo de Guzman, hi there. Kung magiging mythical creature ako, gusto ko Tambaloslos. Yeah, I remember Tambaloslos with with the tongue and all that. Am I correct? Yeah, Tambaloslos. Okay, it's also a Filipino folklore creature. Okay, going back, in Bicol history, there's mention of Gugurang as good god and Aswang as bad god, and somehow like the counterpart of Gugurang. So the oppositor to Gugurang, so somewhat like in Catholic doctrine, Lucifer. Okay. Also, there's the account on the Silagan. I already shared about the Silagan before, but uh, let me read it again. This is an account by Fray Juan de Plasencia, 17th century Franciscan historian. You know that the Franciscans concentrated here in southern Luzon, particularly Camarines Sur, or in Bicol region. So here's the account of Fray Juan de Plasencia. And apparently, he believed in the Silagan, if you listen to the tone of his report. Okay, he said, the Silagan, whose office it was, if it saw anyone clothed in white, was to tear his liver, ate it, thus causing his death. This, like the preceding, was in the island of Catanduanes. Okay. Let no one consider this fable, because in Kalawan, they tore out in this way, through the anus, all the intestines of a Spanish notary who was buried in Calilaya by Fray Juan de Merida. So, somehow, Fray Silagan, sorry, Fray Silagan, Fray de Plasencia was making sumbong to the Spanish authorities. The friars before, even because we had a frailocracy before, the friars were somewhat, required to do reports. Okay, they would write reports to the governor general, etc., and going back to Spain or to the Pope, and they would mention all these elements of Philippine folklore that are actually related to the Aswang culture, like the Silagan. So here, Freddy Plasencia was actually making a report, and well, it looks like he's judging from the tone of his report. It looks like he was also afraid was also afraid of the Silagan because apparently it likes to victimize people clothed in white. And you know what? The friars sometimes were clothed in white, so that's why. So, so that's why Fray de Plasencia was also quite fearful of the so-called Silagan. So this is one example of an account, a real account. I got this from the book of Dr. Danny Herona, From Epic to History. Okay, and this is according to this actually from the report of also of uh, Fray Castaño, Fray Castaño. Okay, all right. What are the Aswang huts? Okay, sorry. Where are the Aswang hot pots in the Philippines then? So if the Aswang is historical, as per our culture and as per oral narratives and all that, where are the Aswang hotspots in the Philippines then? Where are they located? Well, of course, in Manila. There was once a skier, an Aswang skier in Manila. Aswang in Manila. It was all over the headlines. That was during the late 80s or early 90s. Um, well, although the Aswang is supposedly a Southeast Asian uh, mythological or folkloric element, here in the Philippines, the Aswang is supposedly located in the Panay Islands and in Capiz particularly. There's even a Kapuso Mo Jessica So episode, trying to capture the Aswang, but trying to capture via camera, but they somehow failed. I watched it, and you should have brought their Ed Kaluwag, so it would have been more fun and all that. But there was no Aswang sighted. But the believers of the Aswang would just say, of course, cameras are useless. All right. Um, Also here in Bicol, it is believed that Iriga City, okay, Iriga City is also somewhat an aswang hotspot. And even in Capiz, they actually have this belief that um, during the olden days, um, a shipload of aswang was sent here in Bicol, particularly Iriga City, uh, where my parents live. Okay. Um, the question now is, how did they get to Iriga City when in fact we have no seaport? Iriga City has no seaport at all, and maybe they went to a seaport somewhere and then traveled by land to Iriga somehow because it is a fun fact or it is something you know believed by people in Bicol that Iriga is the Aswang capital of Bicol. Okay, as a matter of fact, during our research, I was with the Ateneo de Naga University literature department, and we got a grant from the U.S. government to do research on the supernatural among the Agta. Okay, the Agta tribe at uh, La Anunciacion, a barangay here in Iriga, a barangay known for the Aswang at that. And I got accounts from the Agda about the Aswang, their Aswang experiences in the locality, particularly in that barangay. So there. Do we have scientific explanations for the Aswang? According to my readings, um, it could Aswang could be attributed, or it's possible that we have this belief in the Aswang because of the behavior of nocturnal wildlife. I like to camp also. I camp. I do solo camping, and it's really easy to think that there are aswangs nearby because of the sounds being created by birds, by bats, and other animal, other wildlife. Okay, other wildlife in the forest. Different sounds. But as a camper, there's this discipline, there's this discipline to not think of anything negative and just enjoy the forest, nocturnal creatures, and don't inject anything negative into your mind. Any kind of fear, folklore, fear of the dark, fear of Aswang, because it will escalate, it will grow, and it's difficult to actually do something about it while you're already there camping in the middle of the night. So that's why. So from experience, I do know that yes, nocturnal creatures really do sound like aswang. You would hear tick tick there, quack 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 quack. So it's very easy to think that, or to believe that there are aswangs nearby, which is it could be the case why we have this aswang factor, aswang culture. Also, there's this kind of there's this disorder called XDP or X-linked dystonia Parkinsonism. X-linked dystonia Parkinsonism, or as we said, XDP. This is also called dystonia of Panay because of existing cases. 93% of existing cases can be found in the Panay Islands, and 63% of which are in Capiz. So uh, the symptoms of this disorder is that the 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 patient would have body contortions, body twists, and tongue protrusions. The tongue will be protruding, and the would I'll say good night. I hope I'll not be dreaming of aswang. Okay, good night, good night, Pinay survivalist. Tongue protrusions, and the patient would also be salivating. So it is believed that maybe the aswang culture of Panay, aswang narratives of Panay or copies is due to the preponderance or due to the prevalence of XDP in the area. Okay, the prevalence of XDP in the area. The question now is, do we have sample oral tradition on the aswang? Do we have sample oral tradition on the aswang? Um, In my book, Pagsasatubuan ng Poetikang Bicol noon, published by National Commission for Culture and Arts in 2008, I actually did research on the book of Maximo Ramos and other books as well, and uh, other dissertations and all that, other master's theses on the aswang, particularly on the poetic side of the aswang, on the things being said by people. Uh, to announce the presence or absence of the aswang, or to figure if there's an aswang or there's no aswang, and also the things being uttered by the aswang that somehow happened to have rhyming meter and had poetic value. So I actually recorded them in my book. You might want to check it out. There's also I can give you an example. Uh, s- uh, Puwera sa beat. It's a funny one-liner, Bicol one-liner. Puwera sa beat. It's supposed to be being exclaimed by the aswang before flying, and also there is ang sa gilid kibliton ng sa tahaw sakloton. It's an ariwaga by the aswang. So, yeah. So, you will know where to sleep if you're pregnant. So, don't sleep sa gilid, kibliton, sa kahaw, sakloton. So, don't sleep in the middle of you know, the family, the Filipino family sometimes would sleep together in one area. And don't sleep in the middle if you are pregnant because the aswang would victimize you. So sleep on the sides, not in the middle. That's based on the ariwaga or the proverb. Uh, sa tahaw, sa gilid kibliton sa kahaw sa kluton, sa tahaw sa kluton. Sa gilid kibliton sa tahaw sa kluton. So that's based on that. So if you are the one in the middle should be victimized, the one on the side should just be pinched or poked. That's as per that proverb. So that's a rough translation of that proverb. Well, according to Carmen Valenzuela of Milaorca, Camarines Sur, I got this from the book of Eden Nasayaw, Bicol Beliefs and Folkways. He said that witches are afraid of the hand broom and bolo, especially when they are left at the door of the house. Especially when they are left on the door of the house. And as per our AGTA research also, as per our AGTA research, um, at La Anunciacion, some of the AGTA would tell us that they could actually converse with the tik tik or the wak wak when they would hear them, and they could actually somehow bargain with them so that they won't be victimized. Or when they come across a person they believe to be the aswang, they could actually bargain with them, or they could ask them to not victimize them and all that. So that's the thing we got from the agta from the Anunciacion. The Aswang culture among them is very, very much alive and very organic and real. So much that they even tell us that they could converse with the aswang or with the sidekick of the aswang, the bird, the tik tik or the wak wak. You see, if the tik tik sounds loud enough, it means that the aswang is actually far away. But if the tik tik is kind of, uh, you know, the sound is soft and far away, actually the aswang is near. That's the belief. That's the beliefs. So if the tick tick sound or the wak wak sound is near, because the tick tick is a bird that is supposedly the sidekick of the aswang. Wherever the aswang goes, the tick tick or the wak wak also follows. So it is believed here that if the sound of the wak wak or the tick tick is loud enough, that means the aswang is actually far. But then if it is soft and it is of low decibel, then it's actually quite near. So that's the belief. So those oral traditions, okay, on the aswang. If you want to learn about it, you might want to check the works of Dr. Jesus Cyril Conde of Ateneo de Naga University. His paper on the Agta paranormal or the supernatural beliefs of the Agta. All right, another question. Was the Aswang just a smear campaign on the Babaylan or the Balyana? You see, in 2006, I wrote a play, a stage play, and it was staged in Ateneo de Naga for, it was successful, yeah. It even won awards. It was called The Aswang, Ang Alamat Kang Aswang, The Legend of the Aswang, Ang Alamat Kang Aswang, where I posited inside the play that the Aswang could very well be the Babaylan but victimized by the Spanish friars' smear campaign, in that the Babaylan was the direct arch rival of the Spanish priest, or the Baylan was somewhat uh, uh, somewhat threatened the presence of the Spanish friars. The friars were afraid of her because, you know, the Babaylan was supposedly or the Baylan or the Balyana here in Bicol was supposedly the intermediary, okay, between humans who are in Middle Earth and the heavens and uh, hell or something like, or the spirit world. So somehow the Bailan was actually a spiritual leader, but also believed to be uh, a political figure as well, great advisor and wise person in the community. And with the colonial project of the Spanish friars and the Spaniards, they saw the Bailan as a kind of a threat or competitor. So they performed some kind of smear campaign and called her the Aswang. That was my that was my uh, idea in that play. You see, according to again the book of Dr. Danny Herona, um, the priestesses or the Balyana, uh, to whom the natives entrusted their religious needs and obligations, such as performance of supplicatory rituals, were also considered as village doctors, counselors on the afterlife, and wise people, advisors. That is why, as we said, it could have been that the Spanish friars and the Spanish authorities saw them as a kind of threat to their colonial project. So that's why I came up with the idea and wrote a play on the matter and called it An Alamat Kan Aswang. It was staged in 2006, and actually I don't have the script anymore, but I can rewrite it. I can write another version that is actually a better version of it. I hope I can. Okay, another question. Is there a special bolo or knife, okay, that we can use against the aswang? Is there a special bolo or knife for the aswang? Actually, I mentioned already earlier. We mentioned that as per oral tradition, we can use the spear, we can use the bolo, okay, in killing the aswang. Actually, if you hit the middle of its back, then and the aswang gets immobilized and all that, you can cut it into pieces and all that. As per Bicol culture, the Minasbad is readily the blade of choice when fighting the aswang. Um, as related to Visayan culture, I know a friend named Domsi Barranco who makes punyong knife that is specifically designed to fight the aswang, the punyong knife, because it has bronze engraving or bronze, uh, somewhat casting, bronze casting, and the Minasbad is also with bronze parts, and arguably the way the handguard is constructed, it somehow depicts the aswang as well, because this looks like a tang also. So it's like aswang with a tang, all that long tang. When I was a kid, a small kid, I would usually hear that to fight the aswang you have to have a minasbad, something like this. So that's it. To fight the aswang, you have to have a minasbad. So this is one blade that is specifically um, made also for the aswang. Aside from this being a blade for the cimarrones, as of you know, as a blade for war and for skirmishes for Filipino or cimarron fighting arts, or for farming. This one can also be the blade against the aswang. As I said, this actually depicts a monster, which is somehow reminiscent of the aswang, or similar to the aswang because of the handguard, and this one, this part, the sagang, actually looks like the tongue of this creature. See? So there's really a ball or a special knife for the aswang here. When I was young, um, I had an experience where when all of a sudden we were dining, and all of a sudden we were dining at night, and all of a sudden there was this noise up our roof, and one of my uncles chased the entity with a minasbad. I'm not sure if it was just, it seemed to be human though. It ran on two legs and was good in jumping around and all that. So according to them, it could have been an aswang, but we're not really sure. I didn't see it, but according to him, he could not chase it. It was a person. It was really fast, and it was a dark looking person with dark skin and all that, and it ran really fast, and the stride was so wide and all that. It jumped from the second floor of the house down to the forest, and it disappeared. So that's my experience on the matter. Minas Bad being used to chase something could possibly be just human, but then there's a belief that if that kind of event happens, grab a Minas Bad, use it, not just any other blade. Okay. Now, is the aswang still present in contemporary culture? Is the aswang still present in contemporary culture? Well, what can you say about it? Is the aswang still present? We still tell our kids, oh, don't go out at night, or the aswang might find you. Or we still guard our dead. We still hold vigils at night for our dead during wakes. Uh, Actually, the main reason is that so that the goal, the aswang na lakaw won't steal the body and replace it with the banana tree. Okay. Also in social media, on YouTube, there are still channels devoted to aswang culture, particularly Ghost Hunter 44. Shout out to Ghost Hunter 44. Uh, in their channel, they depicted a scene where they found a real aswang and they actually killed the aswang. So check the video of Ghost Hunter 44. And of course, there's Racy Bayan's channel and show at DZRH. So shout out to Lakay, Racy Bayan. See you in Manila someday. We'll have coffee. So there. Can you name other examples that would show that Aswang culture is still present in contemporary times, particularly in social media, on YouTube? By the way, let me show you. I don't have the blade of Domsi Barranco, but I have this one. It's also a kind of a punyal, okay, dagger that could very well be something you can use against the aswang. So there. So really, That's why it's different. It it's part of our psyche. It represents the darkness of Filipino psyche, being that Filipinos are happy-go-lucky. Filipinos like to be close to each other. Filipinos like the sun. Filipinos like uh, social gatherings. Filipinos like fragrance, cleanliness, life. The aswang is different. The aswang is dark. The aswang is antisocial. It lives in the periphery of human existence. It lives very far from people, as a rule. It lives in the forest. It lives in the wilderness. And the aswang likes death. And the aswang likes foul smelling things, dead bodies, rotten bodies. So the aswang is not fragrant. So the aswang is subversive to Filipino values, I think. But then remember the Balyana, or remember the Babaylan, remember the early priestesses of Philippine society. Remember their penchants for herbal medications, herbal pharmacology. Remember their rituals on the spirit world. Remember the way they would gather remedies from the forest and all that. And remember the colonial project of the Spaniards. Could Aswang be the Baliana, but with you know bad PR campaign coming from the Spaniards and from the friars? I'll leave you with that question for tonight. Jason here for the Hagbayon channel and TMS Talks. See you again next time. Remember, the pen is mightier with the sword. By the way, this channel is devoted to current events, literature, rock music, the outdoors, blade culture, prepping and survivalism, and whatnot. Thanks for watching, and see you again next time if I go live again. I try to invite some friends as well. Good night.